Let me say that when you read your morning newspaper, the headlines say that they charge Stalin as guerrilla. I know plenty people may want to shout, but brother man, what is there to shout about? I living in a yes man society where all the no man becomes the enemy. And if you decide to hold tight to your no, the system have so much different ways of getting you to go. Nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. The system have a vicious way of operating. It's like a vulture when it's about to attack its victim. Once you say the wrong and feeling you're right, it can attack you like a thief in the night. One day you're wealthy, next day a pauper. One day a hero, next day a traitor. And just play you smart and too intelligent, you could die mysteriously in some freak accident. Nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Once you don't want people talk for you and wouldn't do the things that they want you to do, your life is safe whether night or day, because any number could play. Nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-ba-ba-boo. Ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da. There are crimes the system commits could fill your eyes. Let us take the brutal murder of Sister Jean Miles, a woman whose first love was that of her country. Her second love, I know, was honesty. Jean went and exposed a gas station racket. Behavior like that, the system won't have it. And when they attack and turn things around, the system brought Jean worse than any beggar in town. Nothing is strange in the life of a woman out for change. Now, all I know about the system and its working, a better life for my people, I must keep fighting. I cannot be destroyed, I'll tell you why. Tell me how many times can a man die? I die on the shores of Africa. I die in 37 with Uriah. I die outside the square demonstrating with dagger. So charging me as a gorilla, that is only fire. Nothing, nothing, nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Once you don't want people talk for you and wouldn't do the things that they want you to. Your life is safe whether night or day, because any number could play. Nothing, nothing, nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Nothing, nothing, nothing is strange in the life of a man out for change. Nothing, nothing, nothing is strange in the life.
Nothing ends strange in the life of a man out for change. Once you don't want people to talk for you and you want to talk for yourself, then they want to put you in jail. The words of the Black Stallion as we come tonight, big show tonight because the opposition leader is here, Aubrey Norton, and we're going to be talking about a range of issues tonight. So please share the link already. Already, all the front seats are gone, and things are filling up rapidly. We come on air tonight. Lots of action today. As you all know, Kedaki Amsterdam was arrested this morning, ostensibly for some offending statement he made against a big boy, a very big boy, who is well connected, and he is in the police lockup tonight. He was arrested this morning, taken to CID. Wasn't told what he was charged for, what he was arrested for, and it was not until his lawyer Nigel Hughes, got there, and eventually they said that he was being accused of cyber crime. They took him to Ramveld police station, booked him, and he is there tonight. Our understanding is that a civil matter was started by the person who contacted the police to say that Kedaki offended him. And this civil matter is in the courts. And now the police is seeking to bring a criminal proceeding against Kedaki Amsterdam. We in the WPA say very clearly that Kedaki is a political prisoner as we speak. Only a couple of weeks ago, Big Boy was accused of a very, very serious offense, and he was sent off on station bail, wasn't put in the lockups. And Kedaki's been accused of cyber crime, of saying something about somebody, and he is in the lockups right now. It's clear what kind of country we live in. It's clear what kind of country we live in. This morning, the tables begun to turn. A couple of days ago, as you noticed, Congressman Jesse Jackson's son, Jonathan Jackson, was brought here at invitation of the government. They took him up to Linden and they had him on the stage with them. And some of our people had begun to make some noise. What is he doing there? Well, apparently the noise got to him. And today he went to Mocha, our ground zero, and met with the people at Mocha, and you all saw what happened. He met with the opposition leader and his team, members of the PNC and the AFC. I understand he met with his Padre G today. So what was intended to be a rolling out for the government so they can show off, look, we capture a Negro from America. Well, the tables turn because Congressman Jackson said in no uncertain terms, he told Kwame McCoy, I am not a Negro. And put that little, you all know what I want to say, in his place. And that's the place he should be. Good evening. Welcome to Politics 101. Tonight we're going down the road. We're going down the road. Remember, I quoted from the maestro himself, Lord Kitchener. The road make to walk on Carnival Day. Constable, I don't want to cause a rough, but any steel band man cross my path is a long funeral to the Royal Hospital. The road, Guyana, make for all of we, not for one set of people. And this confounded nonsense of believing you can buy black people left, right, and center. You go to Linden, you didn't talk to the leaders of Linden. You're going into the heartland of the PNC, you didn't call the opposition leader and say, let me sit down and plan this national thing by. We discuss every day, but this is a national story, it's the independence. Let me plan. No. You want to go in there to show the Negroes that you're in charge of them. Also, and then you think you bring a Negro from America to skin his BT on them. Also, well, the tables turn today. Good evening to all of you wonderful people. The reason I love you all is because you are a constant. Every night you all are here and you are a witness in. As a little boy I grew up with, hearing from the radio Burnham saying, watch with me one more night. You all have been watching with us here for the last 4 years. And we hope it's not too long. The old people say, 2 man in more. We gotta believe that we're doing it. But it's not my night tonight. Maybe tomorrow night or another night, I gonna deal with Mr. Tonight is Aubrey Norton night. There comes a time in the life of any nation when you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, what we doing, where we going. There are twists and turns along the way, 58 years of independence. This is a country that was ruled by white people. And when the white people left, I told you all, I went to LBI in 1966 May, when the Duke of Edinburgh, I think is the name of the lady husband that came. And I asked my auntie, that white man, she said, well, he come and it's the last time he come, he's not coming back now because we're independent. And what independence means is that we got to traverse the road. I am saying the PPP has undermined our independence. We got to recapture our independence. And the road has been hard and long. And I make no bones about it because people like me, and I dare say people like Aubrey Norton, in 1966, nobody could have told us that at some point we would be talking to the nation in our own voice and with our black faces from Christiansburg or Buxton, wherever. I'm not getting into partisan politics. I'm merely stating the obvious. And I'm trying to rally you all here and the rest of the country to understand the pivotal moment. And we have to understand this moment. Jack Dio could come from unity. Irfan could come from Lenora. And the people on that side So it's their time. Why the people on our side can't understand it's our time. I am not getting into politics here. I leave that for Norton. I am into the sociology. You're black like me, you're poor like me, and poverty is your legacy. I say no. We're beating the poverty, the economic poverty. We're beating that poverty with bountiful ideas and acumen. Good evening. It's not my turn tonight. I'm merely asking the questions, but I have to put that footnote and blame me for it. Say it's Dr. Hines. Are you ready? All right. I think we are ready. Let's bring in Aubrey Norton. He was here 2 weeks ago, and he said some things that some of you all, some of us, were not too happy about. That's how politics go. He's here tonight, and we're going to talk big things tonight. Big things tonight. Are you ready? Let's go. Aubrey Norton, good evening.
Good evening, David.
It seems as though this is about the 10th time we're speaking for the day because of...
Yes, well, we were compelled to speak because when I heard that they picked up Kadaki, knowing the Guyana police force and knowing the PPP regime, I thought, like I said to you, we had to find a lawyer very early, which we did. And, you know, even with a lawyer, this oppressive government, this government that has no decency, this government that has been abusing the arrest of persons for 72 hours, we were like sure that they were going to seek to keep him for 72 hours. More so when it is as a result of the pushing of part of the wealthy family friend elite. And so we have been talking all day.
We have been talking all day, and of course, we managed to get the best of them. Nigel Hughes, and he was there along with one of his young associates, and it was quite a thing. The CID police were trying to not talk to Nigel. Eventually, they had to talk to him, and they were trying to get Kadaki to answer to being a Negro. And Nigel Hughes said, no, he's African Guyanese. You got to take that out from there because he's not answering to Negro. And they had to take out Negro man, and put African Guyanese. It was quite a scene there. Eventually the police came around and so on. But what was clear is that the CID people were telling Nigel they were carrying out orders. They were carrying out orders. Are you surprised? We've lost it. Yes, go ahead. We're hearing you now.
The Ghana police force, I've long argued, has been politicized. I've long argued that if you choose a commissioner because you can control him politically, then you will not be involved in law enforcement. You will be involved in serving your political masters. And so I'm not surprised at all that they say they were operating based on instructions. What I found interesting is you have someone like Critic, and I call his name without fear, who curses, abuses, go on very ridiculous, and they have never charged him for a cybercrime. And I found it in keeping with the normal approach of the police in recent time to go down the road they went. Remember, this is not the first trumped-up charge. From the time this government returned to power in 2020, they have trumped-up charges against many people, and until now they cannot prove one because they are just that trumped-up charges. They had Dharam Lal, who has been accused of rape, who never spent 1 hour in the lockup, 1 minute. But a man who you allege commit a cyber crime is going to be there for 72 hours. And so I agree with you that he is a political prisoner because he's not being dealt with within the confines of the law. He's being dealt with at the whims and fancies of the likes of Jack Dale and Irfan Ali, who are trying to convince people this is one Guyana when they have one treatment for African Guyanese. They have one treatment for the political opposition. But when it comes to crimes on the side of the people from the government, there is another treatment. And so there should be no illusion, none whatsoever. This government is a racist government. All of us want to live in peace. I think all Guyanese want to live in peace. But there cannot be peace while there is injustice. And I think the government is pushing very hard to have a clash because they believe if there is an ethnic clash, then some of the supporters who are dissatisfied with them will return to them. And so they are doing everything to create a confrontation. So I'm not at all surprised with what they did with Kadaki. I'm not at all surprised. Let us not forget, Takoma Gunsi made whatever statement he made. They shackled him. They brought some kind of charge. Has it ever been heard?
Yes, it is in the it's limping its way through the courts.
Correct. Which tells you that they are using the police to punish people they perceive to be their enemies, even without any evidence of any crime. And when people who are close to them commit crimes, like you had the REO in Region 9, which is alleged was involved in a shooting with a young lady. Nothing has happened to him, except he is doing everything now to please the PPP in the region. They pulled Winston Jordan before the courts. They lost. They pulled Christopher Jones. Well, the one with me, it didn't make any sense. But all of these cases went through the door. So you know what they're doing is political harassment and victimization.
Political harassment and victimization. Aubrey, we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. And I want to ask you some straight questions because I think you are leading the opposition, you're leading the PNC at a critical moment, a critical juncture in our history. We talked about that juncture the last time you were here 2 weeks ago. And I think there are all kinds of innovations from some quarters. There are all kinds of interventions from other quarters. And I think it comes with the moment that you are part of. And the moment and the person and the place are all wrapped up together in what CLR James called the fusion of time, place, and person. And I think that you should appreciate that you have to deal with some questions that maybe some of your predecessors did not have to address front on. Aubrey, over 200,000 people voted for the coalition. But there are more people. There are those who didn't vote. There are those who belong to the constituency that because of age or geography didn't vote. You are carrying on your shoulders half of this nation in terms of those who are looking to you for leadership. At a time when this government is, as you just pointed out, very unforgiving when it comes to using the power of the state to hammer the supporters of the opposition, all the supporters, but especially the supporters who make up the bulk of your support base. And as a political scientist, you know when people are being hammered, they look for leadership, they look for direction. And it then puts you, it therefore puts you in a position that a lot of other leaders would run away from. And putting it to you here, Aubrey, that half of this nation right now is looking to you for a direction, not for direction about how to duck and how to hide, but how to face head on the onslaught of this government. Are you aware of the responsibility that you have on your shoulders right now?
I am no doubt aware. David, when I became leader of the PNCR and then leader of the opposition, our supporters felt abandoned. We had to go out there, engage our supporters, motivate them, and bring them back into the fold, which we did. Whatever people want to say about the local government elections, we fought against the odds and maintained our strength. Since then, we continue to mobilize. From the inception, it was recognized that we had to make the international community au fait with what the government is doing. And we have consistently engaged the international community and made them aware of what was happening. I heard Kwame saying today that it is the opposition that organized Mocha. No, it was the government. What the opposition did was to say to the congressman, don't just listen to us. Go to Mocha and speak with the people. Today, the people in Mocha spoke for themselves. And the house slave, Kwame Mackay, tried his best, but the people spoke. One of the things we have to keep doing is exposing them at the international and at the local level. I've always stressed that in this moment, one of the key things is organization. I want to point out the PPP government went into Linden and took over the co-op society and put an interim body. And I said then to the leadership in Linden, and immediately running up, that you need organization. Whenever this meeting is called, we should be so organized that we get rid of the PPP and we have a leadership that reflects the interests of our people. We have been able to do that through organization. So I think it is critical. At this moment, I would say to you, I believe our task is to continue to organize in every nook and cranny. The PPP isn't saying anything, but we did considerable work in the Amerindian communities. And many of the PPP persons they proposed to become Tushaus were rejected by the indigenous people. While all of them that would have succeeded are not APNU, some of them are independent. But the fact that they chose to stand up and fight is indicative of the leadership we give them in terms of helping them to develop the consciousness and engaging them so that they can take on this regime. I believe at this stage, we need to continue our organization. Our organization has to be done in such a way that in the final analysis, when the time comes, we can rally and organize our people against the People's Progressive Party. And I think that is critical. We have been protesting for the last 2 years for a clean voters list and biometrics. We have made our position known to the international community. We are seeing some support coming. for me, the main elements of leadership at this time that we have to exercise are: one, we have to show the ability to overcome problems because there are a lot of odds against us. We have to find novel ways of mobilizing both our people and the financial and other resources we need to take on the government. We have to continuously engage the police, which we have been doing. I'm talking about the likes of the commission on them. I'm talking about the average policeman who we have to continue to educate, to say to them, you are being used and you need to be skillful and understand the struggle and operate in a particular way. Because the government sets out to use you. Isn't it interesting that the persons who they actually sent to Mecca to defend the government were all Afro-Guyanese? The one from housing, whatever nonsense he named. I can't remember his name now. But when you look at it, you could see a buffoon that is being used politically. Now, we have got to continue to educate our people, while at the same time preparing for every eventuality. Some there are who run around and say, I said there will be no protests. I never said that. I said, one, there is need for new forms of protest. And I did say in that presentation, we need to do the organization so whenever you protest, it can achieve its objective. Forbes Burnham warned us, if you go to the destiny to mole, that if you're in a struggle and the first sight to the police, people run, then you will defeat your purpose. But if you have the organization and you can deal with the issues that emerge, you will succeed. And that is the kind of leadership I think that is needed at this stage.
Aubrey, I want to press you on that matter of protest, because protests for a lot of the people on this program and a lot of the people I've been in Guyana now for the last week, and I've talked to people, their understanding of protest is street protest. And they feel that there has been little or no street protest, and they've bought in to the view, advanced by people like myself, that part of the reason the PPP is running roughshod over your supporters, our supporters, it is because they are clear in their mind that there is not going to be any public pushback against them. Can you respond to that? Can you speak to those people who are saying that, yes, you have to organize, but organize for action? Can you speak to these people who are calling for some manifest action against this government in order to push them back?
I do believe that there is need for manifest action, but a manifest action cannot only be street protests. We, over the years...
Yeah, Aubrey, I hear you on that, but I want you to speak to street protests. Now, we hear other protests, but what about street protests? Now, your political personality in itself was built at a time when street protest was used quite effectively to push back the government in the 1990s. So I would like you to address the question of street protests. Are you for street protests or you are not?
I am for any form of a protest that is appropriate. If street protest is needed at the time, I will have no problem. But I do not believe that our first option should be street protests. Let me say this. In 1997-98, when I was General Secretary of the party, I was in the forefront of street protests. At the time, the public servants were in a different situation. Now, even at the end of those protests, you had to end up engaging the government to achieve your objectives. If street protest is going to bring the outcome of us being in power and being able to deal with the People's Progressive Party, I will agree to it. But if at the end of the street protests, you have to go back to the table with the government having the upper hand, I do not believe it's the best thing at this stage. And I do believe there are other forms of protests that we can engage in and achieve some objectives. Unfortunately, some of them I cannot discuss here.
Are there any that you can discuss?
I wouldn't want to, but I think we can organize for workers to go to work and don't work. But I don't want to go down the road. There are a number of things that can be done. What happened in Mocha today is an indication that you can push back on the government without necessarily running to street protests. And you like it or not, it came from organization. And it meant we had to have the capacity, because don't forget, the PPP was spreading all kind of wrong information. We had to have the capacity to, between the time we left the congressman yesterday, last night for a matter of fact, so this morning at 8, we had to have the capacity to engage our leadership at Mocha and fill that building so that the truth could be known. And I said to you, that is a manifestation of organization. I spoke to you just now about what has been happening in Region 9. And it is from our outreach there, we engaging in communities, having our little organization set up so that we can achieve our objectives. And so I do believe that there are a number of options open to us, and street protests should be last resort. And if ever you go to street protests, it cannot be. Two things must happen if you go to street protests. And I want to refer here to Linden. When we were looking at the protests in Linden with the electricity matter, I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
One of the first things I said was that we had to meet out to the Indian community in Linden, which we did, and said to them, this is not a fight between African Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese. This is a fight between a cruel PPP government and people who they are oppressing. And even as we prepare for different forms of struggles against the People's Progressive Party, we have got to be able to meet out and to define this struggle as a clash between the PPP elite, their family, friends, and favorite, and all the people they are oppressing. If your struggle isn't properly defined, you can end up damaging the same struggle that you hope to promote. And so what I'm saying is that essentially we will struggle. Essentially we will protest. But we do not want to run down the road of becoming involved in activities that don't allow us to confront the oppressor, but allow the oppressor to turn the tide against us. And that is a critical matter we have to deal with. So my position is simple and clear. All options are on the table. Even as we organize, there are a number of things that we will do, including mobilization of the people to confront the government now and electorally. We cannot miss the fact that in the present world order and the present system, change is coming only by, or in the main, by electoral means. And to do anything to jeopardize that to me, it doesn't make strategic sense. We have got to struggle in a way that we ensure we're making ourselves, all of us, electable. We have to struggle in a way that the average poor Indo-Guyanese who is suffering just like us, just like the average African Guyanese, the poor Amerindian young man or woman who is suffering like the Afro-Guyanese, we have got to define the struggle in clear terms of the poor class of people confronting this oppressive regime. And do not allow the PPP to run to the narrative that, oh, it's the thugs and they're coming after Indians, etc. You know, I want to do something simple. I was talking with some people and I said to them, you know, there was no Linden, no Wisma massacre. This is what you mean? They had a Wisma massacre. And I asked them how many people died. And they tell me they thought about 50, etc. And 2 or 3 persons died. And not all 3 were related to the disturbances. But the government and certain entities created a perception that there was the massacre of Indians in Linden, which is not true. And therefore, as you do your political work, you have got to engage people so they understand the misinformation and disinformation while we organize to achieve our objectives. I have been involved in organizing protests. I know what it is to protest. I know what it takes to sustain it. But if it is not done properly and in the right context, it could end up, rather than pushing back the PPP, it can end up pushing us back. And you are well aware of what can happen in such circumstances. And therefore, I believe we should leave all options on the table, organize across the country, and deal with whatever situation emerges at the correct time, including the legal option. Because sometimes we tend to see politics in one dimension. You can push back on the government legally. The teachers and others are pushing back on the economic front for better wages and salaries. And the truth is, with all the noise people are talking about weakness of the opposition, the PPP's back is against the wall. It is for us to continue to do what we're doing, do it in a structured way, and continue to push the PPP backs to the wall. And their back will always be to the wall because they are greedy. They are not prepared to ensure that the resources from this country meet the people. So by their very actions, they're alienating a large cross-section of the Guyanese society. You say we are representing 250,000. I believe if our politics is sensible, we will end up representing more than that. I'm not one who believes there can be some massive swing. That is not feasible. But what I do know is that this government is alienating many in its support base who might not vote for you, but they will not vote for the People's Progressive Party. And that also has to be part of our politics.
Aubrey, you said a few moments ago, and thanks very much for that explanation. You said a few moments ago that all groups in Guyana are suffering, all poor people are suffering, and I think you're quite right on that. But isn't it instructive that Congressman today went to Moko and not Port Morant? That isn't it that people in Moko and the people who look like the people in Moko are suffering in a particular kind of way that is different from the people of Port Morant and Albion and so forth? And that perhaps you want, instead of trying to fuse the narrative, is to speak to the suffering of Amerindian by themselves, the suffering of Indians by themselves, and the suffering of African by themselves, rather than trying to lump all 3 together. And then the brutal suffering of Africans gets watered down and lost. Respond to that, please.
I don't agree with you. I agree that there are degrees of suffering.
Yes.
In fact, while I believe the African Guyanese are suffering the most, I do believe that indigenous Guyanese are suffering terribly.
Yes.
And in some regard, because they lack businesses, etc., in a way that no other group faces, they suffer a lot. The African Guyanese suffer. The Indo-Guyanese suffer. But I want to make a few points about sufferings.
Mm-hmm.
All ethnic groups tend to have a different response to sufferings. I engage, and you mentioned Port Morant. We will be in Port Morant. We have been engaging across the country. But engaging in Port Morant or engaging in Bushlat, it isn't going to be an approach in which you seek to get them to rise up against the government. The psychology has been, and the psyche has been one in which they are involved in more passive resistance. The African Guyanese tend to be involved in more active resistance. The indigenous people form of resistance is different and is changing.
Mm-hmm.
It is now for us to analyze all of those situations. While we compartmentalize, you still have to fuse. Because
Yes.
people pursue interests. And what we have to do is create a confluence of interests that shows in large measure poor Africans, poor Amerindians, poor Indians are suffering at the hands of this regime. Our response to the suffering must be different, but we must galvanize people against the suffering and widening the base. And one of the next things we have to do is to begin in a very short while to seek to widen the alliance, to bring in others who you might not believe are willing and involved. I'm at liberty to say who I am meeting and who I am not meeting, but I can say this to you. A large section of a section of the Indo-Guyanese are tired and fed up with the PPP. And we should do nothing to push them back to the PPP. We should do everything to establish one, in government we will be fair. And I know people are critical. They said Granger was fair. And what happened? You have to be fair. First thing. The second thing, you have to be organized in such a way that you can mobilize all ethnic groups. And the third thing, you have to be clear in terms of your vision of where you want to take the society and how you are going to get them there. This morning's exercise exposed the government for what it is. I could have sat at the Marriott and told that congressman everything, which I did. But when he arrived in Mocha, and he saw the behavior of the government, he saw the ineptitude of Kwame McCoy, and he saw how the people who suffered at the hands of this government reacted, you would have achieved the objective you set out to achieve. And I believe in achieving your objectives rather than just being sensational, flamboyant, and then you're not achieving anything.
Aubrey Norton, leader of the PNC and opposition leader, here tonight, answering some questions. Aubrey, I have been very clear in my approach to opposition politics, and by extension, my party, the WPA, is that we are not rocking the opposition boat. We are whenever we are critical, we do so in a respectful way and try to be objective as we can. I have come under a lot of pressure in recent times for what people perceive as my over-the-board support for you and for the PNC. I have gotten so many calls over the weekend that there was a delegation that met, an opposition delegation that met the congressman. The AFC, the PNC was there, but the WPA was not invited. And I'm putting on the screen there Floretta's question. We want to know when the WPA will be back in the coalition. We have been active on social media, and whenever we have a chance to be active in the community, people are seeing us. But they tend to feel that we are left outside of the opposition tent, so to speak, by you. And the recent meeting on the weekend is a good example. And I have had to answer a lot of questions as to why we were not invited to be part of that delegation. Over to you.
All right. Let me start by saying this. You know, y'all weren't left out generally. That I've been engaged in the WPA. We have a few issues to resolve. And once we deal with that, I think there's a general agreement that the WPA will be in the, we call it. Now, I would say this to you. I will acknowledge that I probably should have included the WPA. Now that we would have spoken, once it is not a restricted parliamentary delegation, I'm saying to you, I'm prepared, once there's the scope, to involve the WPA. Now, I am not one who believes in coalition. All of us have to have the same view. I believe in coalition. There will always be the differences of views. Like I say to the AFC, like I've said to you. But I do believe we can work together. And I will take it as an error on my part. And that moving forward, once it's not restricted to a parliamentary delegation, I would say to you, I'm prepared to engage the WPA and have them involved. It's like Glenn. I think, for instance, he does a good job at what he is doing. And we will never be in a position to do what Glenn is doing. The WPA will never be in a position to do what the PNC is doing. The AFC will never be in a position to do what the WPA is doing. But if we could combine all of that against the government, then we can be doing well. And that will be my approach. I think we need to move in the direction of a joint opposition.
Aubrey Norton here tonight, moving in the direction of a joint opposition. Aubrey, I don't like to get into your internal party politics, but there have been some headlines, and I toss it around in my head for the last 24 hours whether I should go where I'm going now, and I've decided that I will go there. Clearly, what is what is at work in the PNC is, on the one hand, democracy. Because once you have democratic engagement, you are going to have some hard punches thrown by the various contestants. But there is a feeling that you all are overdoing it in the PNC. That, for example, the issue regarding the North American region, which I myself have only come to understand it after reading about 4 or 5 stories and talking to people, because it wasn't a straightforward issue. Because I have serious people who are telling me, why Aubrey just expel NAR and throw a whole set of people overseas out of the party. These people bring in money in the party and Aubrey throw them out. And I myself, the first reading, that occurred to me. But as I read, it is much more complex than that. Please, Mr. Norton, if you can explain that which is becoming a disaster with all the back and forth in the media and so forth. Please explain it for this audience.
The truth of the matter is, if you left me, there would have been no back and forth. But some people answered, which I didn't think should happen. This is what is the reality. The reality is the party has groups that function in the United States of America. And as a party, we've made it very clear. We are very thankful for the support of Guyanese in the diaspora. From the time when I became leader of the party, a document was before us in which the North American region of the party wanted to incorporate itself under a 501c. We said we had no problem with that. The Central Executive met, and before I move on, I want to say this. Both Amanza Walton and Gary Best are correct to say they never advised on FARA. And for whoever put it out there saying that, I apologize to them because they never advised on FARA. They met in a committee and the advice was on how we deal with NAR moving forward. And I wanted to clarify that. And I want to repeat it. Both Amanza and Bess were correct. They did not advise on FARA. They advised on the rules that were being developed. And the recommendation that came to the CEC is that the 501c Inc. could operate in the United States in keeping with the laws of the United States. But that there are persons who operate in groups in support of the party. If you are saying you are operating in a group in support of the party, then you will be guided by the party constitution. Now, we made it very clear that it should be guided. This nonsense about expelling people doesn't make any sense. The decision we took was that our groups will continue to operate, do whatever work they do, and that they will meet and establish their own committee because they are not going to operate as a 501c in the United States. So there was no expulsion. Our groups continue to be engaged, functioning, doing what they have to do. And that is the crux of the matter. So, go ahead.
Yeah. The individual groups are reporting directly to Congress Place,
yes,
rather than the umbrella or NAR. All right.
Yeah.
Now, how are delegates allocated from overseas? How has it been done in the past? Did the delegates come from NAR or the delegates came from the individual groups?
They come from the groups. Each
right.
group, even in Guyana, each group identifies its delegates and send it down. NAR doesn't identify delegates. Delegates, the party constitution is clear. For every 10 members you have, one delegate you're entitled to. And that is done at the group level. It has nothing to do with NAR. And mind you, NAR is a misnomer. And from the time I became leader, I said to them, you cannot be calling yourself NAR when you are restricted to the United States. I said to them, the groups in the United States must form the United States PNCR. Groups in Canada that exist form Canada PNCR. And then the groups in Canada and America can meet and form a North American region. But you cannot have a North American region with just groups in the United States. And that is where we are.
Aubrey, is it normal for the leader of the party to be the chairman of the Congress organizing committee?
The leader of the party is an ex officio member of every committee and can be. And I'm not the first leader. When I was general secretary in 1997, the director of Congress was Desmond White. And I was general secretary, and there was a Congress administrator. Now you have a Congress administrator. Just like that, you have a general secretary who's the facilitator. There is absolutely nothing about the leader not being the director of Congress. Where the leader cannot be involved is at two levels. One, the accreditation committee, which is a group. You identify the head of accreditation who deal with all the documentations and decide who are delegates, etc. And then when that process is over, it is handed over to an independent returning officer who conduct the elections. What some people are trying to do is to suggest that I have some role to play in the elections. Not at all. The accreditation committee deals with that, and the returning officer chooses his staff and deal with elections on the day. And I can say to you that will continue, and we will have transparent elections. But I want to tell you something you should know in the political process. When people believe they can lose, they start creating the conditions to say something went wrong.
Aubrey Norton, they're dealing with some internal party matters because these matters have come into the public domain. I don't like to get into the internal matters, but these matters are in the public domain, and I think it's only right that we ask Aubrey to deal with them. Aubrey, I'm going to ask you a frank question that I have gotten from all kinds of people from all stations of life while I was abroad, and more so when I come back. Have you made a deal with the Americans not to have street protests?
I have never engaged the Americans on anything of street protests. I will tell you, from the time I became leader of this party, I engaged the Americans on what the PPP was doing, expressing to them our concerns, and developing relationships with them that could help us in the long term. No foreign company, no foreign embassy can say they had discussions with me and I agree not to be involved in street protests. I saw one who writes nonsense all the time, Eglon, some nonsense name, saying that. It's totally untrue. I went to the United States, never met Exxon in the US. And when I returned home, everybody was asking me, meet Exxon? I never met Exxon. The two times I met Exxon, met them right here with other party persons outside of me, and the information on it was put in the public. I can say this to you. My integrity can stand scrutiny. I have never compromised myself politically and will not. I don't know why I spent all these years building a character and then out of the blues want to be compromised. That won't happen. In fact, I believe one of my greatest strengths is the fact that the PPP has nothing on me. And therefore, I can say to them exactly what I think.
Follow up. It is now in the open that they have been over the years Indian Guyanese business people who have contributed financially to the party. And there is a suggestion that that financial contribution may have slowed down or vanished totally. Have you made a deal to get back that donation? And part of the deal is not to put people on the road. As you know, Indian businesses and businesses in general don't like people on the road. Have you made a deal with Indian?
But let me tell you why that is a stupid argument. Let me tell you why it's extremely stupid. Let's assume you're putting people on the road. Is it the Indian community can be affected now or the Chinese? You see, people don't think sometimes. In 1997, street protests might have affected Indian businesses. And so the Indian community would have gone to the PP and said, you got to end this thing. Right now, most of the business around are Chinese. I can say this to you. I've made no deal with any community, whether it be Black, Indian, Chinese, or indigenous. What I have said, and I do believe it, is that as a party, we should be mobilizing resources from our support base to help us. I did say at one stage that when you go dependent on big businesses alone, when you get government, you have to give the big businesses everything. And therefore, you will not be able to serve the ordinary people in the way you want to serve them. And one of the things I'm committed to is serving the ordinary people in this country. I am criticized for not going at the Pegasus, and the might well have been last night. But when I am on Orange Walk, I engage the average Guyanese who will give me ideas. When I'm on Pleasance Line Top, is the average Guyanese I'm engaging who will give you ideas. You know, a simple man said to me, the next time you're going to talk about poverty and so, this is before I did the interview in Sapphire. The next time you're going to talk on things like poverty and so, you got to illustrate it in a place like Sapphire. I have learned over the years, from the time I was general secretary in this party, some of the best ideas come from ordinary people. All you have got to do is to listen to it. We had a massive bingo here. You think I can take claim that is some brilliant idea from me? No. People walk off the road and say, boy, you support base display bingo. One way for us to mobilize and organize them is through a bingo. And I am happy that Sunday we organized one and many people in the support base benefited because they won $5.6 million in one night. And so I can say to you without fear of successful contradiction, no businessman can say they engage me about street protests and I agree not to be involved in street protests.
One of my smartest viewers and who is a supporter of the opposition, I met her, I sat for about 3 hours at a table with her at Sister Marshall's funeral, and she gave me some instructions. I didn't know she knew me well. I also didn't know I know people who related to her, but she has a comment there that I want you to address there. For the past 100 years, only Guyanese will do that. For the past 100 years, the PNC dreaming of crossover votes at the expense
I never said anything about crossover.
benefit of their. No, I know you didn't say it, but I would like you to address it. I would like you to address it.
Listen to me.
Yeah.
I have said nothing about crossover votes and wouldn't say anything about crossover.
Okay.
I have always said, one, once we can turn out the base, including the mixed race that vote for us, once we can have a certain percentage of the indigenous vote and the small amount of Indo-Guyanese votes, we can win and will win an election, as 2015 would have shown. Now, when you start to talk about crossover votes, you are using a concept that says, oh, we just get about 45% and 6% got to cross over. I do not speak about crossover votes. But even though I don't, I am cognizant of the fact that to run this country, your Indo-Guyanese population has to be comfortable with you. The Amerindian population has to be comfortable with you. The African Guyanese population has to be comfortable with you. And so, in whatever we do, if we are into politics to get government, we have to do things to establish that we will govern in the interest of the people of Guyana and transcend some narrow partisan politics. Whatever criticism you want to make of David Granger, and I'm not saying he's the best person, I'm not saying he was a big politician, I'm saying he proceeded to govern in a fair way, and I think misread the brutality of Barra Jack Dale and allow him the scope to get in. But I do accept that his approach to governance is what is needed in this country.
His approach to the government is what is needed in this country.
But of course, this approach to governments must acknowledge the opponents you're dealing with are cruel, and you can't be a priest. I've always argued, if you're a priest, stay out of politics, because you're likely to meet beasts. You can treat the people in a priestly fashion, but when you're dealing with the opponents you have, if they're beastly, you have to be like them.
Aubrey, I'm going down the road with you here tonight. Robert Corbyn, who you grew up with in the PNC, when he became leader, he relinquished the presidential candidacy. First, he relinquished the presidential candidacy to somebody else other than himself. Later on, he relinquished the leadership of the party, which a lot of people questioned whether he was correct to do that or not. Are you prepared to relinquish the presidential candidacy to a consensus candidate if needs be?
Well, I don't know what you mean by a consensus candidate, but let me go through the issue with Robert Corbyn.
Okay.
Robert Corbyn ran in 2006.
Right.
And the party didn't do well. And Robert magnanimously said that, look, I'm not going to be the candidate in 2011. Those of us who supported Winston Murray, and I was a part of it, brought a motion to the General Council asking for there to be presidential primaries. We started with Winston Murray. Unfortunately, he died. Those primaries came off, and David Granger became the candidate. When the next election was coming, Granger was leader of the party, and he became the candidate. I believe this Congress will speak. When this Congress speaks, I will listen to the people at the Congress.
Is that issue on the agenda of Congress?
Well, anybody can put it on the agenda. All you have to do is propose a question or a motion.
Okay.
And mind you, I will not close the door to any candidate, but I wouldn't open the door to opportunism. I would have to be satisfied that it's a strong candidate who's prepared to face the challenges. Look, in the post-2020 election, I saw many people who were afraid to stand up and speak to the press and say the PPP was involved in rigging the election and challenge them. I did it because I believe in this party and I believe in this country. And whoever I will think of accommodating has to satisfy me and my party that they will run the full course with us and not allow anyone to derail this great party.
Aubrey Norton speaking there on behalf of the People's National Congress on that very, very sensitive issue of the leader of the PNC not necessarily being the presidential candidate of whatever opposition outfit. We don't know yet whether the APNU is going to go by itself or it will go with the AFC and the WPA and others. We don't know that yet. So in many regards, this is a theoretical question that we have posed to Mr. Norton here tonight. Aubrey, you have said that we should do nothing to jeopardize the electoral imperatives because quite rightly, you said the way to change governments now is no longer, uprisings and so on. We all accept that this is election time. However, there are hurdles when it comes to a fair playing field for elections in Guyana. The question of a clean voters list is uppermost on the agenda, on the minds of opposition supporters, your supporters. The question of how do you combat voter impersonation? As I'm on this question only today, people stopped me and were telling me that they've been going around in my village, Buxton, for example, and taking dead people off the list in Buxton, and I assume they're doing it in other Afro-Guyanese areas. But in the Indo-Guyanese areas where you do not have people, activists going around checking out stores, the Indian dead people and people who migrate are still on the list. So they're cleaning the list, quote unquote, in African Guyanese areas, but leaving dead people and other phantoms on the list in the Indian areas. And I understand that there is already a plan afoot to replace those dead people or migrated people in the African Guyanese areas with Venezuelans. How do you intend to convince your audience that the election imperative is it, while at the same time not being sure whether the rules of the game are fair?
You have to continue to work to make the rules of the game fair. Mind you, I can put people to sit down and do it, and they do it. They sit down and listen to that announcement, and just like how they identify an Afro-Guyanese, we can produce a list that we could take off the list in our own time. All it demands, again, is organization. Somebody who has the tolerance to sit down and record the dead in which the area they're from. Charles Jones, officer so died, blah, 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 blah. That is work ongoing. But our major call is for biometrics. And we continue to press the international community on biometrics. We continue every Tuesday to protest at GCOM for biometrics, because that is the option. Now, as we move forward, we have to prepare. We have to prepare for any eventuality. All I would say is this. I am one who don't believe in boycotting an election and you let the government take everything. So you have two options. Put mechanisms in place to curb it or ensure there are no elections.
You're still with me there, Aubrey?
Yeah.
Dr. Henry Jeffrey, in his column this past weekend in the Village Voice, and also it has been distributed on other media platforms, said that the PNC, the PNC must lead the way to constitutional reform. And of course, we know constitutional reform for us is generally electoral reform. There are other aspects of constitutional reform, but generally, when we say constitutional reform, we are talking about mostly electoral reform. Is the PPP prepared to lead the way to constitutional reform? But before even you go there, do you have confidence in this Constitutional Reform Commission? You have nominated people to the Constitutional Reform Body. Do you have confidence in that body? And
the answer is no.
Are you prepared to lead the way?
The answer is no. We are prepared to be in the forefront of the ideas for change, but we have to live in the real world. The PPP has packed the Constitutional Reform Commission with PPP lackeys, and therefore there isn't going to be any significant change that the PPP doesn't agree with. And so I would say this. If you didn't name it, they would say you don't want constitutional reform. We name them, we will go with our ideas, but we are not optimistic that the PPP wants constitutional reform. And if they want constitutional reform, it's to make this society more dictatorial. We, however, want constitutional reform that will make the society more democratic. But with the PPP, I mean, if Jack Leo could get up and say he can clean up corruption, I mean, How does a man who's accused of the most corruption in this country be telling people that he can clean up corruption? It's like charging Caesar to be tried by Caesar. You're putting cat for watch milk.
Aubrey Norton here tonight answering a range of questions. Some of the questions are questions that you have been posing, and other questions that are not posed there tonight, but questions that have been going on in my mind. Aubrey, Congress is going to be in a few weeks. We're already at the end of May. So basically, you have 4 to 5 weeks to go for Congress. I'm going to skip over those who are saying that there's not enough time for Congress, because I don't think that's an issue that the audience here is much interested in. What people are asking is, after what is likely to be a bruising, quote unquote, campaign, is there room for amending offenses, a coming together of the various contestants after the elections? I guess what I'm really asking, how would you evaluate the relations, the political relations, the camaraderie relations? And I assume you all in the PNC haven't thrown out comrade yet from your lexicon, right? What is the level of comradely relations with you and your other two contestants? And can those relations withstand this campaign? And after the elections, whoever win, do you think you all are going to be able to hold the party together and to press forward? We saw, bearing in mind, after the 2020 debacle that it was very difficult to bring the factions together. Are you confident that we are not going to have a repeat of that after this Congress?
It depends on what you mean by unity.
Mm-hmm.
This party base is united.
Yes.
Across the country, this party base is united.
Okay.
After the last Congress, there was an agreement among Aubrey Norton, Richard Van West-Charles, and Joe Harmon that whoever wins will be supported by the other. I won. Now, there were persons who campaigned for Joe Harmon, and I reached out to them and brought them on the executive of the party. And so, from the last Congress, I would have shown that I am prepared to meet out to unite the party. But unity is not a one-sided thing. Both sides, all who are involved, will want to have to work together. It is my sincere hope that after this Congress, whoever is victorious is supported. But I will say this to you. The party membership is going to determine who is leader, who members of the central executive, and the party leadership. Is very clear that having gotten the mandate from the party, we will operate in the best interest of the party. I do believe that we are guided by a constitution, and all and sundry in the party should be guided by the constitution. You know, there are many people who say to me, expel this person, expel that person. The party can set up a disciplinary committee and deal with those who are just damaging the party in the public domain. But I'll say this to you. I believe we will allow all and sundry to campaign, allow the people to decide, and once the people have decided, we will move forward in a united way. And mind you, it's unity of purpose, not unity of people. People mix up unity of purpose with unity of people. Sometimes it is difficult to get everyone to be united on the purpose. But once you have the mass united on the purpose, you can give them leadership, move forward, and be victorious.
Aubrey Norton here tonight. I am sure that many of you, your questions have at least been asked, and Aubrey has answered the questions. Whether all of you are comfortable with the answers to the questions is another. Oh my, is another issue, but certainly the questions have been ventilated here tonight. Aubrey, as we close out, your closing thoughts. I don't know if I will speak to you again before Congress, but your closing thoughts for our audience here tonight, and by extension, the nation, because I am certain that the media and others are listening intently to you on this program. Your closing thoughts.
This is not the first time the People's National Congress reform has had challenges. I was General Secretary in 1997 election when there were the challenges with the GGG. We worked and many of them came back. And finally, we have had Hamilton Green back in our party, and we're happy that our party is united and working together. I do believe that the party membership is sensible. They will make the right choice, and then we'll be united in purpose.
Aubrey Norton, opposition leader, leader of the PNC, leader of the APNU. Thank you so much for graciously agreeing to come back so quickly to Politics 101 to deal with these relatively tough questions, especially the question of protests and street protests and so forth, which has been really engaging people at all levels, both, I assume, within your party, but I can tell you outside of the party on these programs. And as I've walked through a couple of villages in Georgetown in the last week, people have been stopping me to engage on that question. And I have had views on both sides of it. Thank you again, my brother.
I want to say one last thing to you.
Yes.
In leadership, there will always be a multiplicity of views.
Mm-hmm.
It is leadership that has to sit down and decide what is strategically best and give leadership to people so it can be done. I am giving a particular kind of strategic leadership to this party, and most people in the party agree with my leadership. Thank you.
Most people in the party agrees with his leadership, and of course that would be tested at the upcoming Congress when there is going to be an election for leader. Aubrey, are you going back with your same slate, or
Well, I don't know what you mean by the same slate. So let me say this to you. Let me just say this to you.
Yeah.
Young Sherwin Holder is a young engineer, chairman of this party, who's shown that he has intellectual capacity, and he works in the Essequibo and does work there properly. I don't think anybody will question Vince Roy Jordan's ability, since he has been shadow minister of agriculture. He has been doing well. But the next vice chairman is one of our best organizers on the East Bank, Elizabeth Williams Niles. You don't want to change a team like that.
So you're going back with the same young team.
And I will bring in more young people.
Bring in.
You know, a lot of people forget that in this last 2 years of leader, I've exposed a number of young people who showed they could stand on their feet alone. That is critical for me.
And that will have to be the last word. Aubrey, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks for having me. Have a good evening. You and your audience.
Thanks very much. Aubrey Norton there, and really a lot of questions he graciously answered tonight. Let the debate start, because you all have a lot to chew on. For those of you who are joining us late, Kedaki Amsterdam is still in the lockups at Ramveld Police Station. We'll see what happens tomorrow, whether they are going to try to stretch him out for the 72 hours. But he has seen his lawyer, and we are going to see what tomorrow brings. So I'll be back here tomorrow, and tomorrow morning there is going to be Guyanese morning time. Myself and Mark Benchop are going to hold the fort for Kedaki Amsterdam in the morning. The show must go on, and in solidarity with our brother, we are going to make sure that the Buxtonian morning time is not interrupted until he comes back to the seat. Say a prayer for him, and continue to spread the word. I want to report to you all that the Kedaki incident has been brought to the attention of Congressman Jackson. He's been briefed on it. He's aware of what's going on. And as we said, that visit has not turned out to be what the PPP wanted it to be. He has listened to the opposition side. He has listened to African Guyanese. Some people are saying he shed a tear as he listened to the people of Mocha today. And we have briefed him on the arrest and the incarceration of Kedaki Amsterdam, and we are going to continue to monitor him. Rest assured that we are not lying down and taking this. We are going to be as proactive as we can be. Good night. Good night. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning, first on the Buxtonian Guyanese morning time, and then, of course, tomorrow night on Politics 101.